Good afternoon. We're here with Humboldt County Sheriff William Honsal for the July 9th media availability. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
How have crime numbers been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? Has there been an increase or decrease in call volume?
So call volume actually is down this year as opposed to last year. We've taken the calls for service from March until June, and we compared them from 2019 to 2020 stats. And last year we had 20,408 calls for service during that time, and this year we're at 18,763. So we do have reduced calls for service. Some interesting notes are that burglary calls are down by 29%. Domestic violence calls are about the same. Assisting the public is up by 26%. We've had 171 COVID-19 related calls for service. You know, one thing that I think was already pointed out, fireworks this year created a whole lot more calls for service. Those were up 361% over last year. And then neighborhood problems, disturbances, those were up by 32%. So even though we've seen some decline in calls for service, we do have some experience of higher call volume in certain areas.
Has social distancing posed a challenge for deputies when responding to these calls?
It is. I mean, one thing is that we've really trying to stress community policing over the years. You know, getting out of your patrol cars, contacting the public, and those kind of things. And so now we're asking, you know, to stay 6 feet at least, you know, social distance apart and those kind of things. But they are still doing their job. They're out and about, and they're being visible and doing, you know, what we need to do to get the job accomplished.
How have mandatory facial coverings impacted how deputies patrol?
So it hasn't really affected their patrol aspect of things, but you know, we do have a mandatory facial covering policy within our agency, and so they're required to wear a facial covering whenever they enter a building, when we're out in public and they can't social distance, they're supposed to wear a facial covering. But mind you, that's our policy, and so if they cannot wear a facial covering because of due to the circumstance, the urgent need or whatnot, you know, it's when practical. So there are also times when there's a communication issue or a communication barrier, and so the first thing you have to do in those circumstances is lower your facial covering so someone can read your lips and making sure that you can communicate effectively. You know, that's our day and age now. We got to make sure that we can communicate effectively, and a facial covering is a barrier in that we are going to drop our facial coverings to make sure that we can communicate properly. But for the safety of our deputies, for the safety of the public, we recognize and we want to be adhering to the local guidelines and state guidance. We are requiring our deputies to wear those facial coverings, you know, whenever they're out in public and they can't social distance.
And this question you basically just answered,
Yeah.
but according to the CDC, law enforcement who must make contact with individuals confirmed or suspected to have COVID-19 should follow CDC's interim guidance for EMS, but the guidance does not appear to be clear regarding regular law enforcement service calls.
That's right.
Is law enforcement required to wear a mask at all times on the job, and if not, why? And are those who refuse to comply with the masking policy being reprimanded?
Yeah, so that has happened. You know, you know, if we do. You know, there are times when we do have to go and we have to contact someone that's under a quarantine notice or an isolation notice. They either have it or have potential of having, you know, COVID-19. So we're issued N95 masks and goggles and those kind of things per CDC guidelines. And so all of our deputies are issued those. But as far as the facial coverings, like I said before, they're out. They are utilizing them. If a deputy is blatantly not utilizing their facial coverings, you know, and not adhering to our policy, yes, then there is a disciplinary process for that. Just like any of the policies and practices that we have here that deputies don't follow, there is a disciplinary process for that.
During pandemics, law enforcement agencies are responsible for working with government and public health officials to contain spread, serve the local community, and maintain public order. Given the person-to-person spread of COVID-19 through respiratory droplets, law enforcement officers are also at heightened risk of exposure to themselves due to close contact with the public. Has the CDC made specific recommendations for law enforcement agencies to protect officers from exposure to the public, or have you revised your Humboldt County Sheriff's Office standard operating procedures to further protect your deputies?
So CDC has released guidance for law enforcement officials, and it's essentially the same guidance that we do with a lot of the things we're talking about. Making sure you regularly wash your hands, you sanitize those common areas, and that you wear your facial covering, and then when it come in contact with potential COVID-19, you wear your N95 mask and your goggles, and you do those preventative measures, and try to mitigate those potential exposures. But yeah, our deputies are on the front lines. They're contacting people every day that have the potential of having COVID-19, and so it's something that's definitely on their mind, and they're doing their best to try and balance all of that, to make sure that public safety is maintained, their safety is maintained, and they're trying to adhere to all those guidance.
Has the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office encountered issues when trying to identify suspects who are wearing facial coverings?
So that has happened. We had a recent robbery in Trinidad where someone was wearing a mask essentially during that time. Now we've identified who that was, but there are people that are wearing masks that are committing crimes, and so it is something that we are kind of adapting to right now.
As California releases its second wave of 3,500 prison inmates in response to COVID-19 outbreaks within the prisons, how many inmates have been transferred to Humboldt County, and what can you tell the Humboldt public about what the county has done to find housing for those inmates?
So right now, the state has recognized that in their state prison system, there's a lot of people that are having COVID, and so their answer to that is actually releasing people from prison. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's a problem. We're trying to prevent the spread of COVID, and I understand their liability, but to have to push that problem back on the county without offering us resources or a place is something that can be problematic. And also, transporting people that potentially still can be exposed and not going through a quarantine process. That has already happened. So we were recently notified that certain inmates that have 30 days left on their sentences will be released to Humboldt County, and that's about a dozen people. Initially, we thought it was going to go through state parole, but now it looks like it's going to go through our county probation office to be able to monitor those people. So our county probation and public health are working together to try and find, some temporary housing for those individuals. So things are being set up for that to happen, and I'm happy that coordination is there, but still, it should be for essentially our residents and our homeless and those kind of things. But now the state is pushing off an issue on us in our county. So that's troubling. We have our own county jail to worry about as well. So, and then there's also, we were advised that with inmates that have 180 days or less as a part of a sentence, they also are going to be released to our county. And those numbers are 20 or so inmates from the state prison system will be released into Humboldt County. And so that is going to be problematic, and trying to figure out whether or not these people are COVID positive, and trying to isolate them, or quarantine them here in our county and keep track of them to make sure that they're not out spreading COVID that they got in prison into our community is definitely problematic. So our public health, our local probation department, and to the extent even our local parole is trying to help with that problem. And our local parole agents, they're kind of in the blind about this too, and they don't know all the stuff that's happening and how these things are going to be processed here. So we're trying to work together, and trying to because it's going to happen whether we like it or not. So we're doing our best to try and make sure that we can provide that avenue to house them and keep them away from the public as long as we can.
So you talked about the 180 days or less on their release date. These people, some of them may have a criminal history that includes violent crimes. However,
Right.
The state has listed them as nonviolent because their latest offense was nonviolent.
That's correct.
Can you give the Humboldt County public any insight into the criminal background of those that have been released into Humboldt County?
So essentially, I believe that we can essentially, if there was a local crime that occurred here, we talk about that. That's a matter of public record as far as what they've been arrested for in the past, and what they've been convicted of locally here. I don't think that's going to be a problem. Probation is the lead agency in that area, but that is true that what we have inmates that are being released that are not domestic violence related, that are not sex registrants, that are not violent in and of itself over the current offense, but it doesn't mean that they're not violent in general from a previous offense. So that's what they're classifying, and so that can be problematic, and so there will be, and I think probation, if there's a need to alert the public over an inmate that's being released, they will do that.
Do you feel like these releases pose any danger to the local community from a public safety or a public health standpoint?
Well, I do. I mean, I think public health and public safety, it's again an unknown. We're going to have 30 plus inmates from the California State Penitentiary come here into our county, and they have not been able to control the spread of COVID-19 within the state prison system. And so the people that are getting that, they're not going to be isolated. And they're not in isolation right now for 14 days before they're released. And so they're just going to be released into our county. And so I think that is problematic. And I don't think that's very responsible for the state to do so. And so I think there should be assurances that these people are free and clear of COVID, when they are released. And so they can, start on the rehabilitation process so we can keep track of them and all those other things that are necessary.
Kind of shift gears a little now to enforcement. You've often stressed education over enforcement in upholding the county's or the state's shelter-in-place orders. Can you talk about some hypothetical circumstances that would prompt you to cross the line to enforce rather than educate?
Yeah, our goal here is to obviously, we don't want to pile on criminal offenses, especially when, our jail, we're not receiving people in jail. This is a misdemeanor offense, okay? And so we recognize the fact that there are businesses out there that are not in compliance with our public health officers' orders. We're coming up with a process to properly, give them a verbal warning, then give them a written warning, and then that next offense will be a citation. And so we don't want to have to go there, but, take the hypothetical of having a restaurant that's out of compliance, that's operating out of compliance and not properly certified. If they go through those processes and we give them 2 warnings essentially, and that third time they're still operating, we're going to give them a citation. And so again, it's something that we want to stress. We want people to come together as a community. I think Humboldt County overall has done a very, very good job. You look at our numbers in our county, and I think we've done an excellent job in trying to keep COVID at a minimum level. But it's going to take all of us to continue this way. This is going to be a very long, drawn-out operation. So we want to make sure that we do our best to try and keep COVID to the minimal levels as we can by doing all these mitigating factors.
Last question, and you basically just answered it, but isn't everyone pretty much clear on what the rules are now? And do you find that people you educate are truly unaware what the governor or the local authorities are mandating, or are most of them just deliberately disobeying those orders?
I think there are people that that are frustrated. I mean, this thing is a very long, process. 4 months into this now, and people like to have weddings, or going back to church, or going to their favorite restaurant, or going to see a friend, and all these things, getting gatherings together. People are tired and they're fatigued, and so I think they're choosing not to adhere to these because of the COVID fatigue that's in place. And so I think education, I think we've done a pretty good job on educating. Our Joint Information Center has done an excellent job in trying to push information out and try to make sure that they're fully aware of the local orders and our state guidelines. But people, are choosing to ignore because they have something bigger. But what the overall thing is that COVID is still in the community. COVID is out there, and whether you like it or not, it is spread by people getting together. So we want to make sure that people are as safe as possible, and so we want to make sure that we're doing our best to make sure that you're looking out for others.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.